Imagine this for a second. You're sitting in a quiet room, maybe in a church pew, maybe on your couch watching an ancient biblical film. You hear a familiar story. A great flood, rain falling for days, animals marching in pairs, and a single family chosen to survive while the rest of the world disappears underwater. You think you know this story. You've heard it since childhood. You've been told where it happened. You've been told who it belongs to. But what if everything you were taught about the origin of that story is incomplete? What if the story of the Great Flood didn't begin where textbooks say it did? What if it didn't originate in Mesopotamia? Didn't begin with Hebrew scrolls? Didn't even start in what we now call the Middle East? What if the oldest flood story on Earth was born somewhere else entirely? What if it came from Africa? And what if that part of the story was slowly erased? Not by accident, but by history, politics, colonization, and power. Tonight, we're going to explore a version of history most people were never taught. A version that challenges religion, rewrites timelines, and asks a dangerous question. Where did humanity's first memory really come from? Stay with me, because once you see it, you won't unsee it. Almost every civilization on Earth remembers a great flood. The Sumerians told the story of Ziusudra. The Babylonians spoke of Utnapishtim. The Greeks remembered Deucalion. In Asia, the story appears in Hindu, Chinese, and indigenous traditions. Different names, different settings, but the same core narrative. A divine warning, a catastrophic flood, a chosen survivor, a vessel, animals, a mountain, a new beginning. That alone should make us pause. Because when a story appears everywhere, it usually means one thing: it's ancient. But here's what rarely gets mentioned. Africa also remembers the flood. Not once, not twice, but across the entire continent. And some of these African stories are older than the Bible itself, older than writing. So tonight we're not asking whether the flood happened. We're asking something far more unsettling. Where did the memory of it begin? When historians talk about the flood, they often begin in Mesopotamia. Why? Because that's where the earliest written records were found. But writing is not the same as origin. Writing simply means someone finally decided to record a story that already existed. Human beings were telling stories for tens of thousands of years before writing systems existed. They sang them, they memorized them, they passed them from elders to children. Writing didn't create history, captured fragments of memory. And Africa, this is critical, was late to writing but early to humanity itself. If humans originated in Africa, then human memory originated there too. Which means the oldest stories didn't begin on clay tablets. They began on human tongues. Modern maps have trained us to think in boxes. Africa here, Middle East there. But ancient people didn't think this way. Northeast Africa, Arabia, the Levant, and Mesopotamia formed a single connected world for thousands of years. People moved freely across what we now call borders. They traded, intermarried, migrated, worshipped, and shared stories. The Red Sea wasn't a barrier, it was a bridge. Egypt, Nubia, Ethiopia, the Horn of Africa, Arabia, they existed within one cultural continuum often referred to as the Afroasiatic world. So when people say, "This story is Middle Eastern, not African," they're applying modern labels to ancient realities. Stories don't respect borders. They follow people. Now here's where things get truly fascinating. Across Africa, from west to east, north to south, flood stories appear again and again. Fully developed, detailed narratives. Not just river legends, not seasonal rain myths, but world-ending floods. West Africa. Among Yoruba traditions, a divine force becomes angered by human behavior. A flood wipes out much of the world. Survivors escape destruction by reaching higher ground. Humanity begins again. Central Africa. Among the Bakongo, stories describe a time when the world was drowned due to moral failure. A righteous ancestor preserves his family and animals using a floating structure. Birds are sent out to search for dry land. Birds. Animals. A vessel. Let that sink in. East Africa, among the Maasai, a man warned by the Creator prepares for a coming flood. He gathers his family and livestock. Everything else is destroyed. Ethiopian highlands oral traditions speak of a cleansing flood sent to purge corruption. A chosen man survives with animals and rebuilds life afterward. These stories share the same architecture: judgment, water, survival, restoration, and most importantly, they were preserved without writing. One of the greatest misconceptions in modern education is the idea that if something wasn't written, it wasn't reliable. That belief is recent and deeply flawed. African oral historians preserved genealogies stretching back centuries. They memorized kings, battles, laws, and lineages with astonishing accuracy. Oral cultures developed techniques of memory modern societies have forgotten. These stories didn't survive despite being oral. They survived because they were oral, which raises a powerful question. If African societies preserved complex histories orally, why couldn't they preserve a catastrophe as monumental as a world-changing flood? And if these stories predate writing, they may predate the earliest Mesopotamian texts entirely. Let's think logically. If one version of a story exists in dozens of African cultures, passed down independently, and another appears later in written form elsewhere, which one is more likely to be the source? The written record, or the widespread ancestral memory? Writing tends to freeze stories. Oral tradition allows them to travel. The version that survives on clay tablets may not be the first. It may simply be the one history chose to preserve. So if these African flood stories exist, why don't we learn about them? The answer is uncomfortable. During colonial expansion, Africa was portrayed as a continent without history, without civilization, without memory. If African traditions were acknowledged as ancient and sophisticated, colonial domination became harder to justify. So African knowledge was dismissed. Oral history was labeled myth, and African voices were excluded from global scholarship. Meanwhile, traditions connected to Europe and the Bible were protected, elevated, and taught as universal truth. This wasn't an accident. It was a choice. So where does that leave us? It doesn't mean the Bible is false. It doesn't mean anyone's faith is invalid. It means something deeper. It means the Bible may be a collector of ancient memories, not the beginning of them. It means the Middle East may not be the birthplace of civilization, but a crossroads where older stories converged. And it means Africa may not be humanity's forgotten cousin, but its starting point. Maybe the Ark isn't just a boat. Maybe it's a symbol of survival, a memory carried through generations, a story humanity refused to forget. And maybe the real tragedy isn't that the flood story was shared, but that its origin was erased. History isn't just what we were taught. It's what we are brave enough to question. So I'll leave you with this. If the world's oldest story didn't begin where we thought, what other truths are waiting to be rediscovered? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Challenge this idea. Debate it. Because history doesn't belong to one culture. It belongs to all of us. Thanks for watching, and remember, the past is deeper than the page it was written on.